been on first name terms for quite a while, once bought 3 electric chairs for execution purposes. However, when he discovered that they wouldn't work on account of the mid-20th century great Ethiopian electricity famine, he decided to use them as thrones in different parts of his empire. Clearly, as a man who believed in reusing and recycling, he was ahead of the times, environmentally aware, and therefore, without a doubt, a deserved recipient of Times Man of the Year award. The renowned foreign correspondent for PAP, the press agency of Poland, Richard Kapuscinski, was born in 1932 into poverty in Pinsk in Poland, although Pinsk today is in Belarus. As a schoolboy, he saw firsthand the behaviour of both Soviet and Nazi invaders. Africa reminded him of his childhood homeland, where food was scarce and everyone was also barefoot. Kapuscinski, who died in 2007, is the author of The Soccer War, a bloody, scarcely believable conflict that Honduras and El Salvador waged in 1969 over a pair of soccer games. His book about the last Shah of Iran was censored in the United States of America because it mentioned the CIA's 1953 involvement in overthrowing the democratically elected government and replacing it with the despotic Shah. So much for the First Amendment. And so we have seen since 1979 a perfect example of the law of unintended consequences. His greatest book, however, is The Emperor, The Downfall of an Autocrat. The book is about my good friend Haile. Haile had a delightful little dog called Lulu. At the various ceremonies at Haile's court, during which time dragged very slowly, slower than a cowboy chewing a Texan, slower than a sentence in a prison. No, slower than the mist on an icy January morning rising and drying from the top of a fresh cowshed. During these ceremonies, poor Lulu used to be cut short. So she went and peed on the shoes of various dignitaries. One unfortunate, or not, was employed, somewhat like royalty's groom of the chamber. For 10 years he followed in Lulu's footsteps and with a piece of satin wiped the urine from the dignitary's shoes. Hadley was a reforming, benign leader. He put a stop to public execution by disembowelment of those accused of murder. No, not convicted of murder, merely accused. Further, he abolished labasha, a method to find villains by feeding a hallucinogen to young boys who, high as a kite, would identify the villain. I'd like you to close your eyes, please, for a moment while I quote from Kapuscinski's book. The one who had been pointed out in accordance with tradition had his hands and legs cut off. Just try to imagine, my friend, life in a country where, even though you're completely innocent of crime, you can at any moment have your hands and legs cut off. Yes, you're walking down the street when a stupefied child grabs your trouser leg and immediately the crowd starts chopping. You're sitting at home eating a meal when a drunken boy rushes in. They drag you outside and chop you up in the courtyard. Only when you imagine such a life can you understand the profundity of the breakthroughs that His Distinguished Highness made. Many have laughed at there are no knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know. However, this phrase is impeccable syntactically, semantically, logically and rhetorically. Yet, despite his intellectual brilliance, Donald Rumsfeld didn't dream this up. He took it from an academic paper published in a military journal in 1984. The title of the paper was Clausewitz and Modern Wargaming. Losing can be better than winning. Wargaming. Is that something you do with mutant ninja turtles? Losing can be better than winning. Who won the war in Iraq? It certainly wasn't any of the external belligerents or internal participants. Perhaps it was China, the new dominant force in diplomacy. The project for a new American century has shown us that we do indeed live in interesting times. Also, this rather worrying coincidence, the year of this wargaming paper, the subsequent war involving a man called Blair, and a warning about tyranny in a book about a year by another man called Blair. The only drawback in Rummy's quote, however, is that he neglected to include unknown knowns, that which we don't know we know, or more importantly, intentionally refuse to acknowledge that which we know. For example, his buddies knew all about Abu Ghraib but claimed that they, like Manuel, knew nothing. In some ways, life at the court of Haile paralleled that at the court of W. Again, to quote Kapuscinski, whoever wanted to climb the steps of the palace had first of all to master the negative knowledge, what was forbidden to him and his subalterns, what was not to be said or written, what should not be done, what should not be overlooked or neglected. Only from such negative knowledge could positive knowledge be born. But that positive knowledge always remained obscure and worrisome, because no matter how well they knew what not to do, the emperor's favourites ventured only with extreme caution and uncertainty in the area of propositions and postulates. But there was another aspect to life in the empire. Haile liked holidays, and he loved to visit his subjects throughout his empire, and this has resonance for us here. Quoting again at length from Kapuscinski, His Majesty would take his place on the throne, and when he had seated himself, I would slide a pillow under his feet. This had to be done like lightning, so as not to leave our distinguished monarch's legs hanging in the air for even a moment. We all know that His Highness was of small stature. At the same time, the dignity of the imperial office required that he be elevated above his subjects, even in a strictly physical sense. Thus, the imperial thrones had long legs and high seats, especially those left by Emperor Menelik, an exceptionally tall man. Therefore, a contradiction arose between the necessity of a high throne and the figure of His Venerable Majesty, a contradiction most sensitive and troublesome, precisely in the region of the legs, since it is difficult to imagine that an appropriate dignity can be maintained by a person whose legs are dangling in the air like those of a small child. The pillow solved this delicate and all-important conundrum. I was His Most Virtuous Highness's pillow bearer for 26 years. I accompanied His Majesty on travels all around the world, and to tell the truth, I say it with pride, His Majesty could not go anywhere without me. Since his dignity required that he always takes his place on a throne, and he could not sit on a throne without a pillow, and I was the pillow bearer, I had mastered the special protocol of this specialty, and even possessed an extremely useful expert knowledge of the height of various thrones. This allowed me quickly to choose a pillow of just the right size, so that a shocking ill fit, allowing a gap to appear between the pillow and the emperor's shoes, would not occur. In my storeroom, I had 52 pillows of various sizes, thicknesses, materials and colours. I personally monitored their storage constantly, so that fleas, the plague of our country, would not breed there, since the consequences of any such oversight could lead to a very unpleasant scandal. And so I wish to compare Haile's difficulties with thrones to Simon's challenges with microphones. Please, Simon, may I be your pillow bearer? Thank you.